Look at your screen right now. We have all been sold a fascinating story about the future. A narrative where artificial intelligence solves everything, from curing complex diseases to managing our daily schedules. We are told that a utopian paradise is just around the corner. But behind the sleek interfaces and the viral tech demos, a massive crisis is quietly unfolding in Silicon Valley. The reigning champion of this technological revolution is actually navigating incredibly dangerous waters, and the foundational math keeping them afloat is breaking down. Most people think this is just a standard software company writing clever code to make our computers a little bit smarter. But artificial intelligence doesn't play by software rules. It is bound by the brutal physics of electricity and silicon, and those hard physical limits are triggering a meltdown. By the time we reach the end of this current decade, the creators of your favorite chatbot could face total collapse. They are burning through cash at an unprecedented historic rate, and the promised superintelligence might actually be a mirage. This isn't just another story about a tech bubble bursting. It is a violent collision between infinite financial expectations and the unforgiving limits of our physical reality. Let's pull back the curtain on the most expensive gamble ever.
For years, the artificial intelligence industry relied on a rule. It was a mathematical theory known as the scaling law. The premise was incredibly straightforward and highly profitable. If you feed a massive computer more data and more electricity, the resulting digital brain will get proportionately smarter. This single idea fueled hundreds of billions in investments, convincing the world that a digital Dodd was entirely inevitable. But as of late 2025, that golden rule has started to fracture. Engineers working on the next generation of frontier models made a chilling discovery behind closed laboratory doors. Throwing exponentially more computing power at the system was no longer producing those massive leaps in cognitive ability. The highly anticipated models barely outperformed older versions, despite consuming up to 30 times more processing power. We have effectively strip-mined the entire internet for data, and simply making the neural networks bigger isn't working. To hide this terrifying plateau from their nervous investors, developers quietly shifted their strategy to something else. They call it inference time compute, which sounds highly technical, but it really just means the machine takes much longer to think. Instead of actually being fundamentally more intelligent, the program just runs thousands of internal calculations before finally spitting out a relatively standard answer. It is a clever illusion designed to mimic genuine reasoning, but it requires a staggering amount of background processing. And every extra second that machine spends thinking about a prompt, the financial burden on the company grows exponentially heavier. This technical plateau is the absolute worst-case scenario because the entire business model relies on constant evolution.
When you look at the public revenue numbers for these tech giants, everything appears to be thriving in an absolute golden age. They boast about billions in annualized recurring revenue, painting a picture of a healthy and sustainable corporate empire. But deep inside their internal financial spreadsheets, a completely different and terrifying reality is shaping. Current projections show these pioneers bleeding cash rapidly, facing catastrophic losses of $14 billion this year. By 2029, their cumulative deficit could easily surpass an eye-watering $143 billion. So how exactly does a business survive while losing that much money? The answer lies in a highly controversial financial loop. When massive tech conglomerates announce a huge investment, they aren't actually wiring hard currency into a checking account. Instead, they issue massive amounts of digital cloud credits. It is essentially a corporate gift card that can only be spent on the investor's own proprietary server infrastructure. The startup uses those digital credits to rent computing power, which allows the investor to record that transaction as revenue. The money never actually leaves the original corporate ecosystem, but it artificially inflates the valuation of everyone involved. Economists have started calling this a financial Ouroboros, a snake perpetually eating its own tail to simulate infinite growth. It creates a brilliant illusion of massive market demand, but you cannot pay your brilliant research scientists with credits. You cannot pay your landlord or your legal team with digital coupons. Every single month, these startups must scramble for actual cash just to keep their physical lights on and their employees paid. If this circular flow of imaginary capital ever stops spinning, the world's most valuable private company will suffocate overnight.
This massive cash burn might actually be justifiable to investors if everyday consumers were hopelessly addicted to the products. During the initial boom, everyone rushed to try these magical tools, creating the fastest-growing consumer applications in human history. But recent analytics from late 2025 reveal a devastating shift. We have officially reached the end of the artificial intelligence tourist. Consider the highly hyped release of their premier video generator. Millions of curious people eagerly downloaded the application, generating quirky cinematic videos of astronauts and dancing animals. But within 30 days, a staggering 99% of users had completely abandoned the platform and never returned. It turns out that generating random cinematic clips is a fun novelty, but it offers almost zero daily utility for the average working person. People treat these digital platforms like a theme park ride. They show up, take their fascinating futuristic selfie, and then cancel their expensive monthly subscription immediately. Meanwhile, the core chatbot market share is steadily eroding, dropping significantly as competitors integrate similar features directly into the phones and email clients we already use. Faced with a massive user base that refuses to pay premium prices, leadership was forced to break one of their foundational promises. They recently introduced advertisements into the free experience. The CEO once famously described advertising as an absolute last resort, a business model that misaligns a company with its actual users. Deploying this desperate monetization tactic exposes a fragile reality. The consumer market simply isn't adopting this tech fast enough to justify the astronomical costs required to keep it running.
Even if they could somehow fix their broken revenue streams, these companies are about to slam into a literal brick wall. You see, the digital realm is ultimately tethered to the physical world, and the physical world is rapidly running out of resources. To achieve their ultimate dream of an artificial general intelligence, engineers have proposed a facility codenamed Project Stargate. This isn't just a regular server farm tucked away in a quiet suburb. It is a proposed $500 billion supercomputing campus that requires an unprecedented 5 to 10 gigawatts of electricity. To put that astronomical number into proper perspective, a standard nuclear reactor produces roughly 1 gigawatt of power. This single project would require the equivalent energy output of multiple full-scale nuclear power plants running around the clock. The current national power grid simply cannot support this ambition, and building new nuclear infrastructure takes well over a decade. But electricity isn't the only resource these machines are devouring. A standard conversation with a chatbot requires significant cooling, literally evaporating bottles of fresh water with every complex query. Communities across the country are finally starting to fight back, realizing their local utilities are being strained to the breaking point. In just one recent quarter, local opposition successfully derailed nearly $100 billion in planned data center projects. Citizens are rightfully terrified of soaring electricity bills and depleted municipal water supplies during severe droughts. The grand vision of unlimited digital intelligence is currently choking on the very real and very limited supply of earthly resources.
As the public scrutiny surrounding this resource consumption intensifies, the leadership behind these massive projects has grown defensive. During a recent international tour, the most prominent CEO in the space made a comparison that left even his most loyal supporters speechless. When questioned about the staggering energy demands of his servers, he argued that training a human being is also incredibly expensive. He stated that it takes 20 years of life and all the food you eat just to make a single person relatively smart and useful to society. This bizarre statement essentially framed the human experience as an inefficient line item on a corporate balance sheet. It revealed a deeply unsettling worldview among the tech elite, where biological life is merely an expensive input-output equation, and synthetic intelligence is viewed as the superior alternative. This callous perspective isn't just limited to public interviews. Internal documents recently exposed a culture of intense intimidation. Departing employees were allegedly forced to sign aggressive contracts, threatening to strip away millions of dollars in earned equity if they ever dared to criticize the company or its safety practices. It was a calculated system designed to buy total permanent silence, ensuring that any serious concerns about the technology's trajectory were effectively buried under the heavy weight of financial ruin. Furthermore, the leadership pushing for massive nuclear energy expansion happens to hold significant personal investments in nuclear startups. They are essentially creating a massive global energy crisis while conveniently positioning their own side projects as the cure. While they publicly preach about elevating all of humanity, their private actions paint a picture of ruthless corporate dominance.
We are currently witnessing the largest industrial gamble in history, and the potential fallout extends far beyond Silicon Valley. The entire global stock market has become dangerously dependent on the promise that these massive infrastructure investments will pay off. It feels eerily similar to the financial crisis of 2008, where toxic assets were bundled together to simulate immense wealth. Today, instead of subprime mortgages, we have circular cloud credits and interconnected spending commitments worth over $1 trillion. If the underlying technology fails to deliver world-changing profits, this entire intertwined ecosystem could collapse like a house of cards. The panic is already quietly spreading among the institutional investors. Financial executives within these artificial intelligence startups have casually mentioned the need for massive government backstops. They are essentially laying the groundwork for a taxpayer bailout, insinuating that their companies are now simply too big to fail. If their grand experiment runs out of venture capital funding, they expect the everyday citizen to foot the remaining bill. But a dramatic and fiery bankruptcy might not be the actual endgame here. As their cash reserves inevitably dry up over the next few years, the most likely scenario is a quiet and humiliating absorption. The very tech giants who provided those initial cloud computing credits will swoop in and purchase the remaining intellectual property for pennies. The independent pioneers who started this massive global frenzy will simply become another minor department within a larger corporation. They will be swallowed whole by the very monsters they helped create.
The era of viewing artificial intelligence as pure magic is officially over. We have crossed the threshold into a brutal industrial reality where success is measured by access to raw electricity and cooling water rather than the sheer brilliance of a software engineer's code. These companies promised us a utopian future of effortless abundance, but they built their empires on fragile physics and financial illusions. As the scaling laws break down and the massive server farms run dry, we have to ask ourselves if this grand experiment was truly worth the cost. Are we willing to sacrifice our power grids and our natural resources just to make a chatbot generate slightly better corporate emails?
The future of this technology won't be decided by visionary billionaires, but by the hard and unforgiving limits of the planet we actually live on. What's your take on this massive shift in the tech industry? Do you think these companies will find a way to overcome these physical walls, or are we witnessing the slow deflation of the biggest bubble in history? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below.